Okay, let's look at the story that Hunter referenced with the children this morning. It's in the 24th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. We're going to look at the 13th verse on down. I think it's page 1080, something like that in the paging of our Pew Bibles. If you're using an electronic device, I encourage you to use the NIV simply because that's what I've got, and it's nice to have the same wording. So, context is really important for this passage. In the Gospel of Luke, this is the first resurrection account. Now, we don't do that on Easter Sunday, right? On Easter Sunday, we kind of focus on Mary falling at Jesus' feet. You know, we kind of focus on that sunrise kind of experience, and you don't get that in Luke. So what happens in Luke is you've got these folks that are, the women are going to go to the tomb to anoint the body. They find the stone rolled away, and there are two angels, in essence, that are inside. And they say, hey, why are you looking for the living among the dead? And then they talk to the women. The women go back to the men, tell the men what happened. Nobody knows what to do with it. Peter wonders enough to go back to the tomb. He sees it empty. He walks away wondering what happened. So we don't have the Easter sunrise kind of experience in the Gospel of Luke, okay? We together? This is what we have. It's in that evening or late in the afternoon of that same day. This would be what we would call Easter Sunday. Listen, Easter Sunday. Listen for the word of the Lord, picking up in verse 13. Now that same day, the day that the tomb was empty, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. Now let's pause right here for a moment, because I think it's important for us to get the essence of what's happening. So the women come, they tell the men gathered what the angels have said. Peter goes back to the tomb, it's empty, he comes back wondering. And then for some reason, two of them, Cleopas and the other, decide to go to Emmaus. Weird, right? I mean, they just leave the community, they go to Emmaus, a 7 mile walk, so a couple of hours, right? Now, the other thing that's happening on this is when the words that we translate as discussing, talking and discussing, is really not that. It means in Greek literally, I throw something at you, you throw something at me. And so it's thrown. And it implies, well actually it doesn't imply, it's actually an argument. It's a kind of a yelling, kind of a getting at each other. Are we together? You ever been in a setting like that? Ever been married? Okay, never mind. So, right? But you're kind of going at it. I had this happen to me some years ago. The really good friend, Miha Shakur, whose uncle is the Archbishop of Galilee, Abuna Shakur, and Miha was with me. I was teaching a class at Columbia Seminary, and Miha was with me. So he's a Palestinian Christian that lives in Israel, and we were staying in like a continuing education dorm. And one night we're talking to each other, and Miha's like kind of classic Middle Eastern, kind of the way he gets at things, and I just kind of respond to him. So we're kind of going at it. And people got up and left, and we thought, well, we just kind of overwhelmed them. They went and got the police because they thought something was going to happen between us. And so the police come in, and they said, everything okay? Campus police, said, everything okay? And Miha goes, oh, this is my brother. You know my brother. And he comes and starts kissing me all over my body and everything, like, oh, he's my brother. This is just how we discuss. So I say that because that's what's happening here. This isn't like they're walking along thinking. They're like at it. Are we together? Okay. Now Jesus gets that Because when Jesus says to them, he says, what were you discussing? Jesus says, what were you doing? Kind of throwing at each other. Okay, now let's pick up. Here we go. Jesus asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, Cleopas, asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened in these days? That's not polite, by the way. Right? What things, Jesus asks. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it's a third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us what they had seen, a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see Jesus. And Jesus says to them, how foolish you are, and how slow to believe. Now let's pause right here. This isn't like Jesus, oh, how foolish could you be? How slow to believe. The grammar, the tense, everything is clear in this. Jesus is saying, you idiots. He's calling them out. How foolish and how slow to believe. All the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Now pause there for a moment. Okay, Jesus is going to keep walking. It's late. They say, stop, don't go. Most likely, the text doesn't say it, but most likely it's because they had fear for him. Not fear of him, fear for him, that it's late at night, there'd be bandits, you're out walking by yourself, you shouldn't do that. So they invite him in. It says they strongly urged him. You almost get the sense that they're like ready to grab him and pull him in. You're not going anywhere. And then they sit down at the table. But what happens when they sit down at the table? It's their table, Cleopas and the disciple, but Jesus becomes the host. He takes the bread and breaks it. Like, we don't do that in the South. Right? I mean, I can remember we were teaching our kids when they were really little, how like when you get invited, that's back in the days, you know, when you get to go to all these people's houses, all the older members of the church, and you have to bring your little kids along to parade them along. And so the boys would all suit up and they'd get all ready, and they'd have to be, like Cheryl would have them, they were in line. I mean, Cheryl had them, so you could not eat until the hostess, the lady at the table, she had to take her spoon or her fork, and she had to put it to her mouth before you could do it. And so I remember one time we were at Liz McCaskill's. Remember Brandon, Liz McCaskill? And at a beautiful farmhouse, and we're out there, and Liz she just talked a lot. So she'd pick up the fork, and she'd start talking. And the boys were like going like this. And finally, after a few minutes, she realized what was happening, and she laughed, and she said, okay, I'm going to take some bite, and now we can all eat. But what happens with Jesus? He breaks every protocol, right? I mean, he breaks it open. He takes the host. I mean, he takes the bread. He's the one that offers the blessing, right? I don't know what to make about all of that, but it's just not kosher. Kind of pun intended. Okay, so when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. And then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. And they asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us while we talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. And there they found the 11 with those with others assembled together, and saying, "It is true, the Lord is risen and has appeared to Simon." And then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. That's the word of the Lord. Now, there's all kinds of stuff in this passage. And honestly, in the church, we don't give this passage much attention because it's not a really cool Easter sunrise kind of thing. So we kind of put it aside. We really do. We kind of just, or we'll have the walk to Emmaus or something, but there's some stuff in here that is absolutely amazing to me. Now, let me begin with this. When I was in seminary, I had a professor, Diogenes Allen. He was a theologian, philosopher, and he was like the rock star. I mean, everybody wanted to take his classes and all this. I mean, he was kind of the guy everybody wanted, and he was known to be kind of a class curmudgeon. So I'll never forget my very first class. He gets up and he gives his lecture, and you can't raise your hand or anything. You just take the lecture, and then at the very end, he says, "Now this is where I pause for questions. But let me tell you that almost all questions that I get, especially in the first month of a class, are from idiots." Absolutely true. They're from idiots. Almost, but not all. Does anyone have a question? He's the same professor that I had a small little table class with him. There were like 6 of us. And I think we were reading Kierkegaard or something, I don't know, something heady. And he asked a question, and I raised my hand, and he said, "Now, Mr. Wood, the last time you spoke at this table, you wasted all of our time. Are you sure you want to speak now?" He taught me to think more than anybody else in my entire life. Now, I say that because there's this really interesting thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. We're going to get back to the text in a minute, but let me just bear with me. It comes from a paper that was written in 1999 by David Dunning and Justin Kruger, who were sort of social psychologists. And they base it on something that they read that happened in 1995, just a couple of years earlier, where there was a guy named MacArthur Wheeler. MacArthur Wheeler robbed 2 banks, I think in Pennsylvania, 2 banks in the middle of the day with no mask. And he got caught. Imagine. Now here's the thing. Before he went into the bank, rather than putting a mask on, absolutely true story. You can Google him, MacArthur Wheeler, Google it and find it. But before he put a mask, instead of putting a mask on to go in to rob the bank, he knew that lemon juice was used in disappearing ink. And so he decided that he would douse his face with lemon juice and the cameras wouldn't be able to pick up his face. Absolutely true story. And so he did it twice. Lo and behold, the cameras did pick it up. But here was the fascinating thing. When he was arrested and through that process, a trial and all, he was incredulous that the cameras could see him. He was determined continually that he was not going to be seen. Even after he was seen, there was something. He doubled down into it. So here's what these people did, these social psychologists, Dunning and Kruger. They published a paper that said, after all this study, not just with MacArthur Wheeler, but they looked at people, like just say you've got 100 people. And you take the bottom 25%, so the bottom 25 of those people that are the least competent, let's say they're incompetent in the field of that 100. Are we together? And then you take the 25 that are the most competent in that field. Are we together? And then you got the 50 in the middle. The 25 that are the least competent are always the most confident in their wrongness. And the 25 that are the most competent are the most not only humble, but the least confident in their competence. Are we together? Does that make sense? You want me to do it again or you got it? Okay, I don't know how slow you are today. So here we go. Because maybe some of y'all might be down here in this 25%, okay? Now let's just think about that for a moment. I'm going to use language that I shouldn't use, right? But like, they're just dumb. But they're confident dumb. I mean, they're confident in their wrongness. And what the actual study says, and there's all kinds of work that's been done on this since, is that the real challenge is it's really hard to teach someone that's really confident in their wrongness. Because you don't have anything to kind of get at because they're just overwhelmingly confident in that. And then these 25%, sometimes it's hard to get them to lead because they're the ones that know the most, but they realize that the more you know, the less you know. Are we together? Now here's what fascinates me, is that how many of you know some people in the bottom 25? How many of you have been in the bottom 25? Right? Absolutely. True story. It was a weird thing that had happened to me one day. I got invited to go to Emory outside of Atlanta, and I was doing something with a friend who was a professor. And I sat down in the dining hall, and somebody came to sit next to me. Just an older gentleman came and said, "Hey, can I sit with you?" And I said, "Sure." I was by myself. It took me about 10 seconds to realize it was Jimmy Carter. And so here I am, just at the table by myself. Jimmy Carter comes in. This is 30 years ago or so. He's long past being president. And he says, "Can I sit with you?" And I said, "Yes." Well, as soon as Carter sat down, imagine the table filled. And I had the most interesting conversation because all he did was ask questions. And he was asking questions about like international relations and all these kinds of things. And all the people that were sitting around that table, you know what they were doing? They were giving him every answer to solve everything in the world. If only you did it my way, it would all be done. I could solve Israel and Palestine and Gaza in 2 days if you just let me, right? Trust me, right? Are we together? And I was one of them. And then I'm thinking like, wow, what did I lose out on by not asking him? But we all know people that are in that bottom 25, but we also know that we've been in that bottom 25 a lot. And when we're in that bottom 25, what do? We just argue more. And so if you can't, there's an old thing we used to say about preaching. The preacher would see something that would say, weak point, pound pulpit. Right? Weak point, pound pulpit. Just sound confident in what you're going to say. And you just blow through it. Now, I say all of that partly because we need to remember when we are, where we are in all of this, right? I mean, that's a pretty important thing for life. But it's in this story, too. Here are these two, and what have they done? They've left. They've left their family. They left the disciples. They left, one of them is well known enough to even have a name, Cleopas. Given a name, like, well, we need to use his name. They've walked off because they didn't know what to do with this. And so then they just walk away and then they argue the whole way. They don't argue with the women that saw and had the angel encounter. They don't come back and debate with Peter after Peter kind of wondering. They go off together so they can just be going at it. And we see this all the time. We see this in life all the time. And we see it in our faith. It is so much easier to argue about our faith than it is to really try to understand it. It's so much easier for us to say, well, this is what I believe, this is what I believe, this is what I believe. You ever been in a Sunday school class like that? We go around, and this is like the quintessential Protestant Sunday school. Open out the Bible, read the text. Well, what's anybody think? Well, this is what it means to me. 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 Oh, okay. But do we ever ask, what's it mean? I'm not saying that we shouldn't have thoughts and opinions. Please don't misunderstand that. But it's so much easier for us to argue. And the people that I've seen in my life, and when I've been that, is that when you have that need to argue, you are the least interesting person around. Because you're just trying to cover it. You're trying to... And so that's what's going on in this passage. These two guys, the Greek says they're throwing at each other. And why? Because they're trying to get away from it all. They're going to a place to get over it. And it's just easier to get over it by arguing about it than by getting into it. And what happens? In the Gospel of Luke, rather than Jesus coming to those women who were faithful to go to the tomb, or rather coming to Peter as he goes to the tomb, the first account is he goes to these two guys that are just arguing, kind of running away to get away from it all. And what's he say? How foolish are you? How slow to believe? How dumb? Didn't you know? Didn't you know the Messiah had to suffer these things and then enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. So what? I'm not saying it's not important, but what did it do for him? Nothing. Didn't change their thoughts. Maybe it was just he's a better arguer than we are. Didn't change it. So what's he do? He starts to walk on while they're stopping. And then kicks in something. Old school hospitality. You can't let him go. You'd be responsible if something happens to him. Not because they believe, not because they're great believers in Jesus. That's just the way it is, right? Just like you can't pick up the fork until... No, you got to stay with us. We can't take the responsibility here and something, word gets out. You can stay with us. And then he comes in a house. And he prays. And he takes the bread and breaks it. And whoa, their eyes are opened. What happened? What happened? There was an invitation. The stranger came in. There was a meal. There's all these little things. They're little things. But they all add up together to this. Jesus became real because he was close to them. And you don't get any closer than when you have a meal with someone. Think about that for a moment. Rachel Bender, we had a send-off party for Rachel on one Tuesday this week. And so all the staff, like 20 some of us, we went to a Mexican restaurant. And and Chris Moses tells me, Chris does our children's ministry. Chris says, Jim, she said, when I went on a date with the guy, a first date with the guy, and he took me to Mexican. And in that meal, he said, he took all his first dates to Mexican because it was low investment. You got it? He said he took all of his first dates because it was low investment. And then I said to her jokingly, I said, Chris, where did he take you on a second date? Like, you didn't go on a second, did you? She said, I think it was Buffalo Wild Wings. And I'm like, oh, girl, you didn't really go on a second date with him, did you? I'm not sure if I don't know where Buffalo Wild Wings is and whatever. But here's the thing, right? He still took her. He knew he needed to take her out. Date somebody for a few months and not take them to a meal, guys, and see how that works out for you. It doesn't, does it? If you think about your life is shaped by meals more than anything else. The ritual, I hope, in your families of being able to have a dinner meal together, to be able to pray and to be able to talk and just to... Or think about how real it gets, right? So the intimacy, the proximity is so important, right? We're having a meal together. And I gotta be really honest with you. There are times that I think about it, right? Is this somebody that I want to have a meal with, or I just want to meet with? And I'm not the only one that does that. Every one of us does that. Do I want to? Is it, or do I? Or what do I learn from a meal? Are we together? Now that's all like nice and dating and like, am I going to go on a second or third date? But it also plays in the other way. Sometimes the most real arguments you've ever had in your life have been at a dinner table. Think of Thanksgiving dinner with Uncle Billy. Right? I mean, it's so common and so true that we kind of make a joke out of it, like Thanksgiving dinner and all the, Thanksgiving dinner in an election year. It's real. And it's not just symbolism here. I mean, there's a symbolism about the Lord's table with Jesus breaking the bread. There's symbolism about, I get all of that. But it's also just completely life. It's real when you're at the table. You see what someone's table manners are, and that says something to you. My very first church, we were at invited by a couple over for dinner, and we went in, and there were like 7 forks and 6 spoons and all this stuff at the table, and we sit down, and lo and behold, and then up in New Jersey, the guy from South Carolina, Jim, picked up the wrong fork. And the host, the guy, said, "Jim, you're not in South Carolina anymore. That's not the right fork." To which Cheryl said, "Jeff, I got to apologize for him. I know he's an idiot." She didn't say it quite that way, but she's like, met him where he needed to be met. But he is from South Carolina, and he was raised in a tradition that whichever fork the guest picks up is the right fork. So please forgive him for not understanding your table rules. We never went back to dinner at their house. That's a true story. But you see what I'm saying? I mean, even the way we set our table, even the way we do our stuff, it's the closeness, and it defines things, and it speaks to us about all this, and that's happening. Oh, it's fascinating. Oh, the proximity to Jesus. And then, once he's there, and once their eyes are open, it's like, whoa, yeah, now all of that stuff he was reading to us or telling us, now that makes sense. Weren't our hearts burning? Oh, yeah, but they didn't get it until they were with him. And as soon as he's with them, he disappears. And what do? They run back to be with their brothers and sisters. They run back to be with the group. They run back to share. They run back to be part of. They don't need to be getting away anymore. Now they can come back. And this is the power of our life together. And it all comes when we are ready to expect the unexpected. Because I promise you, my friends, when Jesus comes to you, it is almost always, like Dr. Allen would say, almost always he comes as a stranger. And the more you think you know him, the stranger he's going to be when he comes to meet you. All the stuff that you've studied and read, and it's important to have done that has set the stage for your faith, all of that is great. It's critical. I get that. But when he comes, you are going to be blown away. Because it's not going to be what you thought. Maybe partly, but no. It's going to be so much bigger, so much more beautiful, so much more powerful. Thomas Aquinas is a 13th century Dominican monk. And if you listed in the Western world the most brilliant minds of the Western world, many people would do it this way: Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas. Aquinas has, he didn't really call them proofs, but he had 5 demonstrations for the existence of God that are still studied by students every day around the world. 5 proofs for the existence of God. He wrote a book called the Summa Theologica, and it's a long, long text. I mean, it's thick. And it's really the first systematic theology. He's the first one to really take everything that could be believed and to put it all together. And he spent decades working on it. I have it in my study, and I probably go to it 10 times a year. And then one day, he goes into a chapel, a little chapel, just a few people in there. Smartest man on the face of the earth at that point. He goes into a little chapel, and something happens in that chapel. And he had an encounter with Jesus Christ that he had never had before. And he walks out of the chapel, and the very first thing he says, he turns around and he says, "Everything I have written is as if it was straw." He never wrote another word. He never finished the Summa Theologica. His students finished it later. Because all of that brain smart, all of that brought a confidence to him that was preventing him from being able to encounter the living God. Until one day Jesus came to him in a way that he never described what it was. He never explained what it was. It was just, "Everything I have written as if it was straw." And it is the same for you and for me. Yes, we need to understand God's word. It is critical to get us to where we can find him. Just as Jesus did for these two disciples, starting with Moses, working through the prophets. But we need to get close. And the beautiful thing is he's close now. He's in this very room. He's in your life. He's in your neighborhood. How do you know? How do you know if it's him? Invite him in and see. And start with the least likely one. And see. Man. This is good stuff. Because so much of our life is like, yeah, just read it, study it, get it. And I get that. I do that. I teach that. That's my job. But that's nothing until we come close. And in this story, it's a closeness of the meal. It's in the invitation, not letting the stranger go off. It's in the welcome. So what about you? You want to just keep going at it and have this low investment faith? You might be able to date some pretty girls. Or do you really want something deeper? If you want the deeper, it starts with this. Lord Jesus, I want to see your face. Lord Jesus, I want to see your face not as I think it should be, but I want to see your face as it really is. And I'm ready to be overwhelmed. Amen. While Valina's coming up, here's a piece of this for me. It's Memorial Day weekend, and the flag that I put up on in front of my house today is a flag that was given to me by a member of our church 10 years ago. It's a pilot on a mission. He flew a flag for me in the cockpit. And it was a mission that did not go as planned. And created a lot of And I think about what it is to be a patriot today. And I think how easy it is to be incompetent in even knowing what it is, but to be clearly that. And then I think about how my life has been shaped in so many ways by people in our military that I've come to know here, who are in their faith and in their careers at this 25, and yet approach it with the greatest humility and the greater questions. The patriots of our nation, the true patriots of our nation, are those who will challenge us even as a people. And I think about what that means for us, not just for them. So we were in Turkey a couple of weeks ago, and we were in Istanbul at the Hagia Sophia. It's a 5th century church that became a mosque and then became a museum and all this. And the top part of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul is a museum, and the bottom part is used as a mosque. So we're in the museum walking around, and Turkey's a secular nation in theory, though it's 99.9% Muslim, okay? We're walking along in the museum, and I've got a t-shirt on, and I've got my cross on. I don't ever take it off. And the cross is on the outside. And an armed guard comes to me and takes my cross and puts it in my shirt. In a museum, in a secular nation. Now, I don't say that about Turkey, right? That's not my point. My point is, I have the freedom to wear my cross wherever I want in this nation. And my Jewish friends, with whom I break bread, have the right and the freedom to be able to wear a Star of David, whatever it is. The same for my Islamic friends. That's not just because. A price is paid for that. A price for the pursuit of freedom. And so we come on Memorial Day weekend to remember those who gave that last full measure of devotion. Perhaps even as they questioned some of the rightness or the wrongness of their nation. So that you and I might have the freedom that we have. Now we can stop there, and that's okay. But we can go further and say, now that we have this freedom, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to proclaim the love of Jesus? How are we going to proclaim the freedom that enables us to be able to proclaim who Jesus is as love? That's what this weekend is about. Okay, sorry.